Rain hammered down like bullets across the rocky wasteland. The small creature dragged itself forward, leaving a trail of dark blood across the mud. Its silver scales were cracked and broken in several places. One wing hung at an awkward angle, clearly damaged beyond use. The hatchling had not eaten in 6 days. Verdura 7 was not a kind world. The planet sat on the edge of known space, where 3 different alien territories met in an uncomfortable truce. Most species avoided this place. The weather was violent. The local animals were aggressive. The ground itself seemed hostile to life. But some creatures had no choice about where they lived. The dragon hatchling stumbled again and fell hard against a sharp rock. Pain shot through its small body. It made a weak chirping sound that no one would hear. The storm swallowed every noise except thunder and wind. The creature's eyes were starting to close. Cold was seeping into its bones. 3 weeks ago, the hatchling had a family. Its mother had kept it warm. Its siblings had played together in the nesting cave. Then the older dragons came. They fought over territory. Resources were scarce this season. The adults grew desperate and violent. During the chaos, the hatchling got separated. It ran blindly into the wilderness. When it tried to return, the nesting grounds were abandoned. Everyone had fled or died. The hatchling did not understand politics or survival. It only knew that it was alone and dying. Through the sheets of rain, something caught its attention. Light, artificial light that did not flicker like lightning. The creature lifted its head with enormous effort. In the distance, maybe half a kilometer away, stood a cluster of buildings. They were simple structures made of metal and concrete. Tall fences surrounded them. Heat rose from vents on the roofs. The hatchling knew about other species from genetic memory passed down through dragon bloodlines. It knew that most beings fear dragons. They saw teeth and claws and scales and assumed danger. They shot first and never asked questions. But the hatchling had no other options. It would die out here in the rain. At least near the buildings, there might be warmth. Maybe shelter. Maybe a quick end would be better than slow freezing. The creature dragged itself forward again. Each meter took minutes. Its vision blurred. The lights seemed to dance and split into multiple copies. Time lost meaning. David Hayes finished securing the supply crates in Storage Bay 3. His shift was almost done. Tomorrow, another soldier would arrive to take over for 2 weeks while David got rotation leave. He looked forward to that. Outpost Delta 9 was the loneliest assignment in the Frontier Corps. One person maintained a research station while automated systems collected environmental data. Most days, David saw nothing but rocks and rain and the occasional violent dust storm. He pulled on his weatherproof jacket and stepped outside to do the evening perimeter check. Protocol required a visual inspection of the fence line twice daily. Animals sometimes tried to dig under the barriers. The motion sensors were good, but not perfect. The rain hit his face immediately. David pulled up his hood and activated his flashlight. He walked the familiar path around the compound. Everything looked normal. The generators hummed steadily. The fence showed no damage. He was about to head back inside when his light swept across something near the eastern gate. A shape lay crumpled in the mud just outside the barrier. David moved closer. His first thought was that debris from the storm had piled up against the fence. Then the shape moved slightly. David's training kicked in immediately. He pulled out his scanner and checked for threats. The device showed one life form, small size, body temperature dropping rapidly. No weapons detected. No hostile intent registered. David opened the gate carefully and approached. His flashlight illuminated silver scales covered in mud and blood. A dragon hatchling, no bigger than a large dog, lay barely breathing in front of him. David had seen pictures of dragons in the core briefing materials. They were classified as dangerous megafauna. First contact with adult dragons had gone badly 70 years ago. Since then, humans kept their distance. Dragons did the same, but this was not an adult. This was a child, dying alone in a storm. David's family had raised livestock on a farming colony before he joined the military. He remembered finding injured animals as a boy. He remembered his mother saying that all creatures deserve kindness, especially when they were helpless. Protocol said to report and maintain distance. Protocol said dragons were dangerous. David knelt in the mud and gently touched the hatchling's neck. The creature's pulse was weak and irregular. Its breathing came in shallow gasps. One wing was clearly broken. Deep cuts marked its body. This dragon would die within the hour without help. That he looked back at the outpost. No one would know if he broke protocol. The next supply ship would not arrive for 3 weeks. Communications were limited to emergency channels only. David was alone out here with only his conscience to answer to. The hatchling's eye opened slightly. It looked at David with an expression that seemed to carry both fear and desperate hope. That look decided everything. David carefully slid his arms under the small dragon's body. The creature was heavier than it looked, probably 80 kilograms. He lifted slowly, trying not to cause more pain. The hatchling made a weak sound, but did not resist. It seemed to understand that this was help, not harm. David carried the dying dragon through the gate, across the compound, and into the storage bay where the lights were warm and the rain could not reach them anymore. He had no idea what he was doing or what would happen next. He only knew that he could not let this creature die alone in the mud. Sometimes the right choice was also the most dangerous one. David Hayes had just made that choice. The storage bay smelled like metal and cleaning supplies. David laid the dragon, hatchling on a pile of thermal blankets he had spread across the floor. Emergency lights cast a soft glow over everything. The creature shivered despite the warmth. Its breathing sounded wrong, rattling and uneven. David ran to the medical station and grabbed the first aid kit. His hands moved quickly, pulling out supplies. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication. None of it was designed for dragons. He had no idea if human medicine would even work on this creature. But doing something felt better than doing nothing. He knelt beside the hatchling and examined the wounds. 3 deep cuts across its side were still bleeding. The broken wing would need to be immobilized. Dark bruises covered its legs. David worked carefully, cleaning each injury with gentle movements. The dragon flinched but did not pull away. Its large eyes followed David's every action. The medical database had a section on xenobiology. David pulled it up on his tablet and searched frantically for information. Dragon physiology was listed as incomplete. Most of the data came from dead specimens studied decades ago. It was better than nothing. He learned that dragons had fast healing capabilities if they received proper nutrition. Their body chemistry was similar enough to Earth reptiles that some medications might work. Temperature regulation was critical for young dragons. Cold could kill them within hours. David administered a mild painkiller at half the recommended dose for a creature this size. He bandaged the wounds with careful precision, the way his mother had taught him to wrap injuries on farm animals. The broken wing was trickier. He fashioned a splint from medical supports and secured it as gently as possible. The hatchling made soft sounds during this process, somewhere between whimpers and chirps. When the medical work was finished, David sat back and studied his unexpected patient. The dragon was actually beautiful. Its scales were silver gray, like polished metal. Small ridges ran along its spine. Its eyes were intelligent and aware, not like an animal, but like something more. Someone more. David realized he was exhausted. He checked the time and saw that 2 hours had passed. His stomach reminded him that he had missed dinner. He stood and walked to the food storage unit. Military rations were not exciting, but they kept a person alive. He grabbed a meal pack and heated it quickly. As he ate, he noticed the dragon watching him. Those eyes tracked every movement. When David lifted the food to his mouth, the hatchling's gaze followed with obvious interest. It had been starving when he found it. Medicine alone would not save it. David opened another meal pack and approached carefully. The dragon tensed, but did not try to move away. David held out a piece of protein bar. The hatchling sniffed at it cautiously, then opened its mouth. Small sharp teeth were visible. David placed the food inside. The dragon chewed slowly at first, then with more enthusiasm. It swallowed and looked at David with clear expectation. David laughed despite everything. He broke off more pieces and hand-fed them one by one. The hatchling ate carefully, never biting or snapping. It seemed to understand that David was being kind. After finishing 3 full meal packs, the dragon looked more alert. Color was returning to its scales. The shivering had stopped. It shifted position slightly and made a sound like a cat purring, low and rhythmic. David pulled over a crate and sat down nearby. He talked while the dragon rested. Speaking out loud helped organize his thoughts. He explained where they were. He described Outpost Delta 9 and its purpose. He told the dragon about Earth and farming colonies and why he had joined the Frontier Corps. It felt strange talking to a creature that probably did not understand human language, but the dragon seemed to listen. Its eyes never left his face. Days passed in a careful routine. David performed his regular duties during normal hours. He sent standard reports to command. Everything appeared normal from the outside. But whenever he had free time, he returned to the storage bay where the dragon was hidden. The hatchling healed remarkably fast. Within a week, the wounds had closed to thin scars. The wing was still splinted, but the dragon could move around the bay carefully. It followed David everywhere, staying close like a shadow. When David sat down, the dragon settled beside him. When David worked on equipment, the creature watched with obvious curiosity. David started teaching simple communication. He pointed at objects and said their names. The dragon could not speak, but it seemed to understand. When David held up food and said the word, the hatchling's eyes brightened. When David pointed at himself and said his name repeatedly, the dragon made a sound that was almost like trying to copy it. On the 10th day, something remarkable happened. David was sitting on the floor, eating his lunch and reading a technical manual. The dragon lay beside him, resting its head on its front legs. Suddenly, David felt something in his mind. Not words exactly, more like feelings and images. He saw himself through the dragon's eyes. He felt gratitude so strong it made his chest tight. He sensed trust and affection. David looked at the hatchling in shock. The dragon looked back with what could only be described as a smile. Its mouth opened slightly, tongue visible. The feeling came again, stronger now. Safety, family, home. David understood then that dragons were not just intelligent animals. They were telepathic beings who could share thoughts and emotions. This changed everything until he reached out slowly and placed his hand on the dragon's head. The creature leaned into the touch, closing its eyes. David felt the connection deepen. He sent his own feelings back. Care, protection. You are not alone anymore. The dragon's purring sound grew louder. David decided that the creature needed a name. He thought about those silver scales, the color of ash after a fire has died down. Simple and fitting. He spoke the name out loud. The dragon opened its eyes, and the connection flared with recognition and joy. A name meant identity. It meant belonging. It meant someone cared enough to make you real. 3 weeks transformed everything. The dragon hatchling David had named Ash was no longer dying and helpless. The creature had grown noticeably larger, now the size of a full-grown human. Its scales gleamed with health. The broken wing had healed enough that Ash could fold it properly against its body. Most importantly, the telepathic connection between human and dragon had grown stronger each day. David no longer felt alone at Outpost Delta 9. Every morning, he woke to find Ash waiting near his quarters. The dragon had learned the daily routine. It knew when David did equipment checks. It understood when he needed to send reports. Ash stayed quiet during those times, hidden in the storage bay where sensors would not detect it. But during free hours, they communicated in ways David had never imagined possible. Ash would project images directly into David's mind. Simple things at first. A memory of flying before the wing broke. The taste of some alien fruit from the dragon's home territory. Feelings of fear when the older dragons fought. David learned to send images back. He showed Ash pictures of Earth from his memories. Green fields, oceans, his family's farm. The dragon absorbed everything with fascination. Ash seemed especially interested in David's childhood memories of caring for animals. The dragon understood that David's kindness was not accidental. It came from how he was raised. Through their connection, David learned pieces of dragon history. Ash's species was ancient, far older than humanity. They'd lived on dozens of worlds across this region of space. Dragons were natural telepaths who communicated through shared thoughts and emotions. This made them seem unpredictable to other species who relied on spoken language. Misunderstandings led to conflict. Conflict led to fear. Fear led to violence. Dragon numbers had been declining for generations. They needed specific conditions to nest successfully. As other species expanded across the galaxy, those safe places disappeared. Dragons became refugees in their own territories, driven to increasingly harsh worlds like Verdura. 7 at Ash's colony had been desperate. Food was scarce. Nesting caves were overcrowded. When a rival group challenged them for resources, the adults fought instead of fleeing. During the chaos, hatchlings like Ash were abandoned or lost. Most had probably died. Ash survived only because it found David. This knowledge weighed on David. He understood now that the creature sleeping in his storage bay was part of something much larger and more tragic than one orphan hatchling. But he had no idea what to do about it. He was just a supply logistics specialist at a remote outpost. He had no authority, no connections to people who made important decisions. What he had was Ash, and that would have to be enough for now. The dragon's intelligence became more obvious daily. Ash learned to recognize written words on screens and equipment labels. The creature could not read in the human sense, but memorized symbols and associated them with meanings David shared telepathically. Ash began to understand human technology. The dragon watched David repair equipment with intense focus, absorbing how things worked. One afternoon, a severe storm knocked out one of the perimeter sensors. David went outside to fix it, and Ash followed despite the rain. The dragon could not help with repairs, but it wanted to be near David. While David worked, his wrench slipped and fell into the mud. Before he could reach for it, Ash picked up the tool carefully in its mouth and handed it back. David felt pride radiating from the dragon. It wanted to be useful, to contribute somehow. That evening, David made a decision. He activated his personal log recorder, something he rarely used. He needed to document what was happening here. If something went wrong, if he got caught breaking protocol, at least there would be a record of why he did it. He spoke directly to the camera. He explained finding Ash. He described the healing process and the growing bond. He talked about dragon telepathy and their history as Ash had shared it. He made it clear that everything he learned contradicted official reports that classified dragons as mindless, dangerous animals. David ended the recording with a simple statement. If intelligence and emotion made a being worthy of protection, then dragons qualified completely. He would not apologize for saving Ash's life. The next morning brought unexpected trouble. David was reviewing supply schedules when the communication system activated. Incoming priority transmission. His stomach dropped. Priority messages were rare at Outpost Delta 9. He opened the channel. A woman's face appeared on the screen. She wore a Frontier Corps commander's uniform. Her expression was professional but tired. She identified herself as Commander Rebecca Stone. She was leading an inspection team that would arrive at Outpost Delta 9 in 48 hours. Standard evaluation procedures. Nothing to worry about. David felt panic rising. Ash had grown too large to easily hide. The storage bay would be inspected. Commander Stone's team would discover the dragon immediately. David would face serious consequences for breaking protocol. Worse, Ash would probably be taken away for study or worse. David closed the communication channel and sat in silence. His mind raced through options. He could try to move Ash outside before the inspection, but where would the dragon go? The wilderness that nearly killed it once? He could confess now and hope for mercy, but military rules were strict. He could run, abandon his post, but that would make everything worse. Ash must have sensed David's distress through their connection. The dragon appeared in the doorway, moving with surprising quietness for something so large. Ash projected a feeling of concern and confusion. What was wrong? David looked at his unexpected friend. He realized that whatever happened next, he would not abandon Ash. Not to protocol, not to regulations, not to fear. He had made a choice when he carried a dying hatchling through the rain. He would stand by that choice now. He reached out and touched Ash's scaled neck. The dragon pressed closer, offering comfort. David felt the telepathic bond strengthen. They would face whatever came together. 48 hours passed faster than David wanted. He spent the time trying to prepare Ash for what might happen. Through their telepathic connection, he explained that other humans would arrive. Some might be afraid. Some might react with hostility. Ash needed to stay calm no matter what happened. The dragon understood more than David expected. Ash projected images showing that the dragon species had dealt with frightened beings before. Fear led to violence. Violence led to death. Ash would not fight unless David was in danger. The dragon made that promise clear through feelings stronger than words. David cleaned the outpost thoroughly. He organized supply records. He made everything look professional and proper. Everything except the dragon sleeping in Storage Bay 3. There was no way to hide that. The transport ship arrived exactly on schedule. David watched from the landing pad as it touched down. The rear hatch opened and 4 people emerged. Commander Rebecca Stone led the group. She was shorter than David expected, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. Behind her came 2 soldiers carrying equipment cases and a civilian specialist who looked nervous about being on Verdura 7. David saluted properly. Commander Stone returned it with practiced efficiency. She studied him for a moment before speaking. Her voice was firm but not unkind. She introduced her team and explained the inspection process. Standard procedure. They would check all systems, review records, evaluate living conditions. It would take most of the day. David was to continue normal operations and answer questions as needed. David's mouth was dry. He acknowledged the orders and led them toward the main building. His mind screamed at him to confess immediately, but fear kept him silent. Maybe they would miss Ash somehow. Maybe a miracle would happen. A miracle came. They were 2 hours into the inspection when one of the soldiers went to check the storage bays. David heard the man's shout of alarm from 3 rooms away. His heart stopped. This was it that he ran toward the storage bay with Commander Stone right behind him. They arrived to find the soldier backing away from the door, his weapon drawn. Through the open entrance, David could see Ash. The dragon had risen to full height, making itself look larger. A defensive posture. Its eyes were fixed on the armed soldier. Commander Stone raised her hand immediately. She ordered the soldier to lower his weapon, but stay ready. Her voice carried authority that cut through panic. She looked at David with an expression that demanded explanation. David stepped between the soldier and Ash. The dragon recognized him and relaxed slightly. Through their connection, David felt Ash's fear and confusion. Strange humans with weapons. Danger. But trust in David remained absolute. David found his voice. He explained quickly. He told them about finding Ash dying in the storm, about choosing to help instead of following protocol, about learning that dragons were telepathic and intelligent. He left nothing out. His words tumbled over each other in desperation. Commander Stone listened without interrupting. Her face revealed nothing. When David finished, silence filled the storage bay. The other team members looked shocked. The nervous civilian specialist seemed fascinated rather than afraid. Stone approached slowly. She studied Ash with the careful attention of someone assessing a tactical situation. The dragon stood perfectly still, projecting calm through the connection with David. Stone noticed the healed wounds, the splint that had been removed from the wing, the organized sleeping area David had created. She asked David direct questions. Could the dragon understand them? Could it communicate? Was it dangerous? Had there been any aggressive behavior? David answered honestly. Yes to understanding. Yes to communication through telepathy. No to danger unless provoked. Ash had been nothing but gentle despite having every reason to fear humans. Stone turned to her team. She ordered them to secure the area and say nothing about this discovery until she decided how to proceed. The soldiers looked uncomfortable but obeyed. The civilian specialist asked if he could study the dragon. Stone shut that down immediately with a sharp look. She walked to a quieter corner and activated her secure communication device. David could not hear the conversation, but it lasted nearly 20 minutes. Ash pressed close to David during the wait, seeking reassurance. David stroked the dragon's scales and sent calming thoughts. When Commander Stone finished her call, her expression was grim. She deactivated the communication device and approached David. What she said next changed everything. The colonial administration had classified dragons as dangerous wildlife 70 years ago after a disastrous first contact. Since then, official policy treated them as threats to be avoided or eliminated. But recently, attacks attributed to dragons had increased. Colonies on 3 worlds had reported damage and casualties. Political pressure was building to authorize military action against dragon populations. Stone had been ordered to investigate these attacks. That was the real reason for her inspection tour. Command suspected that something more complicated was happening, but they had no proof. No one had successfully communicated with dragons to learn their perspective. Until now. Stone looked at Ash, then at David. She made a decision that would risk her career. She gave David 48 hours to prove that dragons could coexist peacefully with humans. If he succeeded, she would take that evidence to her superiors and fight for policy changes. If he failed, or if Ash showed any aggression, she would have no choice but to follow orders and secure the creature for military research. David felt relief and terror in equal measure. 48 hours to change 70 years of fear and misunderstanding. It seemed impossible, but then Ash stepped forward. The dragon moved past David and approached Commander Stone directly. The woman tensed but held her ground. Ash lowered its head in a gesture that was clearly non-threatening. Then the dragon did something remarkable. It projected a telepathic message, not just to David but outward, trying to reach Stone. The commander gasped. Her eyes widened. She was feeling the connection, probably the first human besides David to experience dragon telepathy. Ash showed her images. Dragon hatchlings starving. Nesting grounds destroyed by industrial expansion. Adult dragons trying to retrieve lost children from colony territories, being shot at, defending themselves in desperation. The attacks were not aggression. They were rescue attempts by terrified parents. Commander Stone stood frozen as the images faded. Tears ran down her face. She looked at David with an expression of horror and understanding. The truth was worse than anyone had imagined. Humans and dragons had been at war for 70 years over a tragic misunderstanding. And now everything had to change. Commander Stone spent the next 6 hours working with David and Ash. The dragon shared more memories through telepathic connection, and this time Stone could receive them clearly. The civilian specialist, a xenobiologist named Dr. Paul Wagner, recorded everything with scientific precision. His earlier nervousness had transformed into intense fascination. The images Ash projected painted a devastating picture. 70 years ago, human colony ships had landed on a world called Terran 5. The planet seemed perfect, rich soil, abundant water, ideal climate. But humans did not realize they had built their first settlement directly over a dragon sanctuary. The underground caves were critical breeding grounds used for thousands of years. When construction machines broke through into the cave system, desperate dragon parents tried to drive the intruders away. Humans saw aggressive monsters. Dragons saw invaders threatening their children. The situation escalated rapidly. Weapons fire killed several dragons. In response, adult dragons attacked the colony, trying to force evacuation. More deaths followed on both sides. The colonial administration declared dragons hostile and prohibited contact. Future colonies avoided known dragon territories, but the galaxy was large and information was incomplete. Humans kept accidentally settling near dragon sanctuaries. Each incident repeated the same tragic pattern. Fear and misunderstanding led to violence. From the dragon perspective, humans were invaders who destroyed their homes and stole their hatchlings. Some colonies actually had captured young dragons, though by accident. Construction equipment would uncover a nest. Workers would find what they thought were dangerous animals and secure them for study. To dragon parents, this looked like kidnapping. The recent increase in attacks was driven by desperation. Dragon populations were collapsing. They needed those sanctuaries to survive as a species. Adults were willing to die, trying to save their children from what they perceived as systematic extermination. Commander Stone listened to all of this with growing anger. Not at David or Ash, but at the tragic waste of it all. Two intelligent species destroying each other over misunderstanding. She contacted her superiors again and presented the evidence. Dr. Wagner added his professional assessment that dragons showed all markers of sapient intelligence and deserve protection under first contact protocols. The response from colonial administration was mixed. Some officials were sympathetic. Others were skeptical. Many worried about political fallout. Changing 70 years of policy would be controversial. But they agreed to send a diplomatic team to investigate further. Then complications arrived that a priority alert came through on military channels. A rogue special operations unit had intercepted communications about a dragon being held at Outpost Delta 9. This unit operated under the authority of a hardline faction within the military that wanted aggressive action against dragons. They were en route to Delta 9 with orders to capture Ash for weapons research. Commander Stone's face went pale. She had 40 minutes before the rogue unit arrived. Not enough time to evacuate. Not enough options. She gathered her team and explained the situation. They had to protect Ash until the diplomatic team could arrive and take proper custody. David felt cold fear spreading through his chest. Weapons research meant dissection. It meant torture disguised as science. He looked at Ash and knew he would rather die than let that happen. The dragon sensed his thoughts and pressed close. Through their connection, Ash made something clear. The dragon would not let David die protecting it. If necessary, Ash would surrender to spare David from consequences. David rejected that immediately. They were family now. Family protected each other. Commander Stone's team prepared defensive positions. It was not much. 2 soldiers with standard weapons against a special operations unit designed for combat. But they would make a stand anyway. Then Ash did something unexpected. The dragon moved to the center of the storage bay and closed its eyes. Its scales began to shimmer with faint light. David felt the telepathic connection expand outward like ripples on water. Ash was broadcasting, sending a message far beyond the outpost. Doctor Wagner gasped. His instruments were detecting energy signatures at ranges that should be impossible. Ash was calling for help. 10 minutes passed in tense silence. The rogue unit's transport ship appeared on sensors, approaching fast. Commander Stone gave final orders to her team. Hold fire unless directly threatened. Try to negotiate. By time for the diplomatic team, the transport landed hard outside the perimeter fence. Hatches opened and soldiers poured out. They moved with military precision, surrounding the outpost. Their commander, a colonel named Harris, demanded immediate surrender of the dragon specimen. Commander Stone refused. She stepped outside to meet Harris personally. Her voice was firm. The dragon was under her protection. She had evidence that dragons were sapient beings deserving of first contact protocols. She had orders from colonial administration to maintain custody until diplomats arrived. Harris was not interested in diplomacy. He had his own orders. He gave Stone one final chance to comply. When she refused again, Harris ordered his unit to breach the outpost by force. That was when the sky filled with wings. Dragons appeared from every direction. Not a few. Dozens of them. Adults in their full size and power. They descended toward the outpost in a coordinated formation that was clearly intelligent and purposeful. Their scales reflected the setting sun in brilliant colors. Silver, gold, deep red, midnight blue. Harris's unit panicked. Soldiers raised weapons in all directions. The colonel screamed orders that nobody followed. Fear overtook training, but the dragons did not attack. They landed in a wide circle around the outpost and waited. David could feel them through his connection with Ash. They were confused and frightened, but they had heard the hatchlings call for help. They came because dragons did not abandon their young. Not anymore. Ash walked outside slowly. David followed, staying close. The adult dragons focused on the hatchling with obvious recognition. One massive silver dragon, probably female, moved forward carefully. She lowered her head and touched noses with Ash. David felt overwhelming emotion through the connection. Relief, joy, grief for time lost. This was Ash's mother. She had been searching for weeks. Through Ash, the adult dragon sent a message that everyone present could sense on some level. They did not want war. They wanted their children back. They wanted safe places to live. They wanted to be left alone. Harris still had his weapon raised, but his hands were shaking. He was staring at intelligence he could not deny. These were not mindless beasts. These were parents protecting their families. Commander Stone seized the moment. She stepped forward and addressed the dragons directly, trusting that Ash would relay her words. She spoke about misunderstanding and tragedy, about humans who wanted peace, about the possibility of finding a solution that protected both species. The dragons listened. They did not trust easily, but they were willing to hear more. David stood beside Ash, one hand resting on the dragon's neck. Around them, human soldiers and adult dragons watched each other warily. Everything balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move could shatter this fragile moment. But David believed in possibility. He believed that his choice to save one dying hatchling could somehow save everyone. The standoff lasted 3 hours. Humans and dragons faced each other across the outpost grounds as the sun set behind distant mountains. Nobody moved aggressively. Nobody backed down. They simply waited while the universe decided which way history would turn. Colonel Harris finally lowered his weapon. His hands were still shaking, but something had changed in his eyes. He looked at the dragons surrounding them and understood that military force would not work here. If shooting started, everyone would die. His special operations unit was skilled, but they were vastly outnumbered by creatures that could breathe fire and tear through metal with their claws. More importantly, Harris could see intelligence in how the dragons organized themselves. They positioned scouts at high points. They kept the youngest dragons protected in the center. They communicated through sounds and gestures that were clearly language. This was not animal behavior. This was military strategy. Commander Stone's communication device activated. The diplomatic team had arrived in orbit and was sending down a shuttle. Estimated arrival was 20 minutes. Stone relayed this information to both Harris and, through Ash, to the assembled dragons. The dragons conferred among themselves. David could feel fragments of their telepathic conversation through his connection with Ash. The adult dragons were deeply suspicious. They had been hunted and driven from their homes for generations. Why should they trust human promises now? But Ash vouched for David. The hatchling shared memories of kindness and healing, of being fed by hand, of gentle words and protection. One human had chosen compassion over fear. Perhaps others could do the same. The silver dragon who was Ash's mother studied David with intense focus. She approached him slowly, each step deliberate. David's instinct was to run, but he forced himself to stand still. This dragon could kill him without effort, but he trusted Ash's connection to family. The mother dragon lowered her massive head until she was eye level with David. She stared into him as if reading his soul. Then she did something that shocked everyone present. She pressed her forehead gently against David's chest in a gesture of recognition and gratitude. She understood that this human had saved her child. Ash chirped happily and rubbed against both David and the mother dragon. The hatchling projected pure joy through the telepathic network. Family reunited. Safety restored. Other adult dragons relaxed visibly. If the mother dragon accepted this human, they would follow her lead. The circle of dragons settled into resting positions. They would wait for the diplomatic shuttle. The shuttle landed in the cleared space beyond the outpost. 5 people emerged, wearing formal diplomatic insignia. They were led by an older woman named Ambassador Chun, who had spent 40 years negotiating treaties between different species. She looked at the assembled dragons without fear, only deep interest. Ambassador Chun approached Commander Stone first and received a quick briefing. Then she walked toward the dragons with slow, careful movements. She stopped at a respectful distance and spoke clearly. Her voice carried authority earned through decades of experience. She acknowledged the tragedy of the past 70 years. She admitted that humans had made terrible mistakes based on fear and ignorance. She could not undo the deaths or destroyed sanctuaries. but she could promise that humanity would listen now and work toward justice. Ash translated for the dragons. The hatchling had learned enough about human communication to bridge the gap between telepathic and spoken language. Through Ash, the dragons responded. They wanted three things. First, immediate cessation of all hostile actions against dragons. Second, identification and protection of remaining sanctuaries. Third, return of any captive dragons, especially hatchlings. If humans agreed to these terms, dragons would share information about dangerous worlds where humans wanted to settle. They would help protect human colonies from threats that humans did not understand. Dragons had lived in this region of space for thousands of years. They knew things that could save human lives. Ambassador Chen listened carefully. She consulted with her team through private communication channels. After 20 minutes of discussion, she returned with an answer. The colonial administration agreed in principle to all three demands. The details would need formal negotiation, but humanitarian concerns would be prioritized. Military action against dragons would cease immediately. Teams would be dispatched to locate sanctuaries and establish protection zones. Any captive dragons would be located and returned to their families. In exchange, dragons would agree to formal diplomatic relations. Both species would establish communication protocols to prevent future misunderstandings. Dragons would provide consultation on colony placement to avoid conflicts. They would offer assistance during emergencies on dangerous worlds. The Silver Mother Dragon considered these terms. Through Ash, she communicated with the other adults. David could sense the weight of their decision. Dragons had every reason to reject human promises. But the alternative was continued war that would eventually destroy both species. The Mother Dragon finally responded through Ash. Dragons would accept this agreement with one condition. The human called David Hayes must serve as the first official liaison between species. He had proven that humans could be trusted. He understood dragons in ways others did not. He would ensure that promises were kept. David felt shock ripple through him. Ambassador Chen looked at him with raised eyebrows. Commander Stone smiled slightly. This was unprecedented, but it made sense. David had accidentally become the most important diplomatic figure in human-dragon relations. Ambassador Chen agreed immediately. David was officially appointed special liaison to the Dragon Nations, reporting directly to the Colonial Administration's Diplomatic Corps. His first assignment would be establishing the communication protocols and helping locate captive dragons. As formal agreements were recorded and transmitted to relevant authorities, David sat with Ash and the Mother Dragon. The hatchling was clearly happy, splitting time between human friend and dragon parent. The Mother Dragon projected gratitude that transcended language. Her child lived because one human chose kindness. The next weeks transformed the frontier. Teams worked to locate and protect dragon sanctuaries. 17 captive hatchlings were found in research facilities and returned to their families. Human colonies received warnings about areas to avoid. Dragons began sharing knowledge about dangerous predators and environmental hazards. David split his time between human outposts and dragon gathering sites. He learned to communicate more fluently through the telepathic network. He helped resolve conflicts before they escalated. He became the bridge that both species needed. Ash grew into a strong young adult under the Mother Dragon's care. But the bond with David remained powerful. The dragon visited regularly, bringing news from dragon communities and simply spending time with a human who had saved its life 6 months after that rainy night when David found a dying hatchling. He stood on a cliff overlooking a restored dragon sanctuary. Hundreds of dragons nested in the caves below. Hatchlings played under the watchful eyes of adults. This place had been nearly abandoned. Now it thrived under formal protection. Ash landed beside David, wings fully healed and powerful. The dragon projected contentment and pride. This was what one act of kindness had created. This was what happened when someone chose compassion over fear. David looked at his friend and smiled. He thought about that stormy night, about the choice to carry a dying creature to safety despite protocol and common sense. That choice had seemed small at the time, just one person helping one animal, but small choices could change everything. One soldier with a heart of gold had accidentally saved two species from destroying each other. He had proven that the best of humanity was not our weapons or technology. It was our capacity to see suffering and choose to help. To look at something different and dangerous and still recognize a child who needed saving. Ash pressed close and shared a simple thought. Home, family, forever. David rested his hand on the dragon's scaled neck. Some bonds transcended species and circumstance. Some friendships were forged in rain and desperation and grew into something that could change the galaxy. He had found Ash. Ash had found him, and together they had found hope.